world is coming out of its COVID slumber, and that's igniting demand for everything from jeans to handbags to even dress shoes. Let's zero in on the demand for jeans with Kontoor Brands CEO Scott Baxter, who's coming off a better than expected earnings report this week. Scott, always nice to get some time with you. Look, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot coming at U.S. shoppers. Inflation, high gas prices, the situation in Russia and Ukraine. Do you see a more cautious U.S. consumer headed into the spring?
No, we think the consumer is in really good shape. Certainly here in North America, we think one of the things that's happening is, you just mentioned it early, people coming out of the pandemic slumber. We think people are getting back into the market and they're purchasing for that after being home for a couple of years. So we think the U.S. consumer is fairly resilient right now.
And what about the consumer around the globe, Scott? You guys don't just sell in the United States. And so I'm curious what markets look like across the world.
You know, we talked a little bit in our earnings call about some of the countries in Europe reopening. They've had it particularly hard where they've really had some lockdowns in Europe. So we find it encouraging that some of those countries are reopening. And then on our report yesterday, we talked a little bit about our China business being fairly good and fairly resilient also during this time. So, you know, right now, pretty good across the globe. We just need to go ahead and make sure that this pandemic, this reopening, kind of stays the course, and hopefully it does for everybody.
Scott, do you have any exposures to Russia or Ukraine? I mean, do you sell to third-party distributors in there? Do you manufacturing anything in those countries?
We do not manufacture anything in those countries, and we do not have any direct operations in those countries. We do have a distributor that we utilize for the entire region in that area of the world. When we spun off 3.5 years ago, we made the decision not to have a direct operation there. So that was a long time ago decision.
And I want to ask you as well about the president's commentary around last night, because you guys, as a manufacturer, there was a lot of talk about manufacturing in the State of the Union speech, and in particular, the state of manufacturing in the United States. So first, I want to play what the president said last night.
Okay.
To compete for the jobs of the future, we also need a level playing field with China and other competitors. That's why it's so important to pass the Bipartisan Innovation Act sitting in Congress that will make record investments in emerging technologies and American manufacturing. There's something happening in America. Just look around and you'll see an amazing story. The rebirth of pride that comes from stamping products made in America. The revitalization of American manufacturing. Companies are choosing to build new factories here when just a few years ago they would have gone overseas.
So I'm curious if you guys, how much of your product is made in the United States and sort of how you think about the economics of it at this point.
Well, one of the things that we did, and we haven't had a chance when I've talked to the two of you to talk about this, but when we spun off, we made the decision to own a piece of our manufacturing operation. And so we actually own plants in Mexico and Honduras. Approximately 40% of our production comes from that area. And then a lot of our parts and components makers are here in North America also. So we're in this hemisphere already. We're one of the few apparel companies that is positioned like that. And we think it uniquely helps us from a strategy standpoint because we're very quick to market. And so we have a much less lead time, and it helps from an innovation standpoint. But I was very encouraged by what the president said last night.
What would convince you to bring manufacturing to the United States specifically? Is it currently for your apparel manufacturing just too expensive to make things in the U.S.?
Well, I think it's a lot of things right now. I mean, very specifically, we already have operations that are running very smoothly and that work really cohesively with our parts and components manufacturers that we have, the partners that we have, in North America and around the globe. But certainly, we always look at everything, and we'll continue to always look at everything, and we want to evolve with how the world is evolving. But right now, things are running very smoothly for us in this North American region.
Scott, there seems to be a budding trend, or strengthening trend, I should say, for the Western look, that Western style. What do you think is driving that, and where do you see that playing in your business?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think that during the pandemic, people really wanted to be outside and they wanted to be part of something. And I think that whole Western, feel and the whole Western look and, the feeling of being outside and being active and being part of a culture, I think it's been really significant. And then, of course, there have been some shows like Yellowstone that have been extremely popular. And I think that's helped to drive demand too. And we've had a big collaboration with Yellowstone, on that and have a partnership with them. And it's also hitting, pretty strongly in female too. So I think it's carrying to both genders, which is really important. But it has been really a huge phenomenon, and we have benefited from it. And we think it's here to stay. So we're pretty excited about this Western thing that's happening around the country.
I just can't pull off the cowboy boots, Scott. I can't do it, but I appreciate what you and the Kontoor team are doing in the Western look. Kontoor Brands CEO Scott Baxter, good to see you. We'll talk to you.